February 22nd. Entry by Joseph Kessler. Loose paper.
This is the longest I've gone without picking up a brush. I haven't painted in 13 months. I have old paintings that I've stored away in the event I have an episode, so as not to arouse suspicion that I've lost my touch and can no longer work. I leave the paintings outside my door and Max takes them away. I've gone through almost all my reserves, and I'm nervous. I'm frozen. I haven't left my studio for nearly 3 weeks and only occasionally eat or shower. I either have no need for sleep or I sleep for days. It's unpredictable. I don't want to speak to anyone. I've developed a stammer. I feel like I'm going insane. No one can know. I need to act normal until this passes. I need to try to be the old me, but I have more and more trouble remembering who the old me was. Every day, Max has begged me to go out into the world, and I was afraid if I kept saying no, then he'd get worried. So finally, I said yes. The normal thing a normal person would do would just be to go outside for a walk. But my nerves are destroyed. I look in the mirror, and I know it's me looking back, but it doesn't look like me. Has my nose always looked like this? Is my face really so round? My eyes don't look like my eyes. My reflection is like an actor behind glass pantomiming me as I move. I need to paint myself. A self-portrait. Before I forget what I look like. If I don't start painting again soon, the buyers will stop buying, and already there's a movement. I have no evidence yet. There's something greater behind this situation I'm in. I feel something dreadful is going to happen, and it's closing in, but if I write any further about it, then it might come true. I'll stop. I'll go outside with Max tomorrow. I'm going to get a drink now, and then I'll start painting.
February 22nd. Evening. Entry by Joseph Kessler. Loose paper.
Oh my God. It was horrible. Max met me on my front steps, blowing into his hands to keep his fingers warm. When I came down the steps, he put his hand out for a shake, but I didn't want to touch his breathy, wet hand, so instead I put my hand on his shoulder and said hello and that it was nice to see him. He cocked his head and asked why I wasn't wearing a coat or a hat, and I said, the cold is invigorating, and he still made me go inside to bundle up. I laughed it off, and he laughed it off too, but candidly, I forgot my coat entirely. My head was somewhere else. I forgot it was winter. We were walking down Jean Mance, surrounded on either side by dead trees under a dark gray sky that was one heavy steel cloud. I was sure to answer Max's questions politely. Just, yes, no, I think so. Things are okay. I've never felt better. I'm just tired. Yes, it's coming along quite well. I felt a prickling on the back of my neck before I heard them. I looked to the sky. 6 humming black dots came out of the cloud in formation. They descended and took shape. They were dive bombers. They banked to the right, flew in a lazy circle, and descended farther down, disappearing behind the houses, then flying back up, nearly wing to wing in a tight triangle. I grabbed Max's arm and gasped. I pointed to the sky, but the planes disappeared behind the roofs right as he looked up. And he gave me a strange look and asked what was the matter, and for a moment I wondered if I had imagined it, and if my eyes were playing tricks on me. I held him next to me, tightly. We continued to walk, and I heard the buzzing approaching us, followed by concussive bursts that echoed in my stomach. Max didn't seem perturbed in the slightest. Maybe he was in shock. And then the explosions came closer. The planes screamed as they descended. I couldn't see them, but I could hear them. We were surrounded. Just boom, 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 followed by tuk, 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 of machine guns. I see it when I close my eyes. My neighbors' houses reduced to smoldering craters spilling out stone into the streets. Fires eating entire city blocks, and the dead, oh my God, the dead, spilled out in the streets. Limbless, intestines ballooning out from their split bellies. Windows shattered. The sky was blanketed in black smoke. And then an explosion landed right in front of us, and then everything was black. I'm lying in bed now. I'm intact. I'm in one piece. I don't know how I got here. My forehead smarts, but I'm alive. I want to look out the window, but I can't bear it. I can't possibly face it.
February 23rd, Max Leclerc's journal.
I blame myself for persuading Joseph out of the house, but I didn't know he would act so strangely. He came outside without a coat on or his shoes tied. It was -10 degrees out. I told him to put on a coat, and he began screaming at me, yelling that he could take care of himself. I finally calmed him down, and he went in the house for his coat. When he came out, it was as if nothing had happened. He had a big grin, but his eyes weren't smiling. It was so strange and unsettling. I should have taken him by the arm and brought him into the house then and there. But as we started to walk, he was calm again, but a little distant. He hardly volunteered more than one-word answers. I asked point blank if he was feeling okay, and he said he'd never been better, and that he was just tired. We did a loop around the block, turned on to Jean Mont's from Milton, when he froze and pointed to the sky. I didn't see anything. He shook his head and held me close, digging his fingers into my arm. We continued to walk when he stopped dead and stared upward. He grabbed his hair and screamed insanely. His head darted around up to the sky, down to the street from side to side. He grabbed my face and cried out, his eyes unfocused like he was seeing through me. He covered his eyes and darted down the sidewalk until he tripped on his untied shoes and hit his head hard against the cement. I ran to help him, and his pupils were wide. He was muttering to himself like he was somewhere far away. I finally brought him to his feet and practically carried him back home. We walked through his front door. His house was an absolute disaster. Clothes, dirty dishes, empty bottles everywhere. I made no mention of it to not upset him any further. Step by step, I led him upstairs, wrapped the gash on his forehead, and put him to bed. I spent the next 4 hours cleaning. I filled 4 recycling bags with empty wine bottles and several more bags of trash. A sick, sweet smell of garbage and rotting food hangs in the house, barely masked by bleach and pine sol. I feel like I hardly made a dent. I don't know who to call, or if I should ask for help, or what I would even say, and to whom.
February 25th. Entry by Joseph Kessler. Loose paper.
After spending an entire day shaking in bed, waiting for more bombs to drop, I finally peeked outside. The street was perfectly calm. My neighbors' houses were all there. The street was in one piece, no ambulances, no field hospitals, nothing. It was perfectly normal, same as it ever was. I jumped back with a start when I saw a face on the other side of the window. A man stared back at me with tired, dark eyes. His hair was wild and he needed a shave. He had gauze wrapped around his forehead with a small dot of blood seeping through above his right eye. I had no idea how he climbed to the top floor of my window when I realized it was my reflection looking back at me. I'm ashamed of myself. And I promise you, the attack felt real, and even at this moment, I'm not convinced that it wasn't real, but I know it wasn't. Oh my God. It's never been this bad. But my head feels clearer today. My thoughts race, then slow down, but I feel even enough. I'll work on my self-portrait today. I can't bear to look at myself in the mirror, so I'll look at my reflection in the window, sit down and paint, get up to glance at my reflection, and sit down and paint, and so on. I'm too embarrassed to look at myself. I need to be cheerful the next time I speak to Max. I'll come up with some excuse. I'll clean myself up a little and we'll laugh this whole thing off. The house smells like pine needles.
February 27th, Max Leclerc's journal.
Joseph came downstairs yesterday, and we finally had a chance to speak. He seems to be doing somewhat better. He still has a desperate, faraway look in his eyes, and although he speaks at a normal speed, it's like his words trail a few words behind his thoughts. On the bright side, he's finally trimmed his beard and showered. I noticed paint on his hands and under his fingernails, and he said he'd been working again. What a relief. He didn't go into details about his work, but he said it's a type of self-portrait. I'm interested to see how it turns out. Joseph brought up his episode before I had a chance to ask. He explained he had been drinking too much the night before and admitted to having a few in the morning as well. He did seem embarrassed, but he also laughed it off with a "these things happen" sort of attitude and said he would slow down his drinking. I don't know. I didn't smell anything on him when we were together that day, and when he snapped in the street, it was more like he was in some sort of trance than under the influence of anything. I reminded him he had pointed to the sky like there was something there. His cheeks turned red, and immediately he went on the defensive. He claims he was too drunk to have any memory of the episode, and besides, he had apologized. With that, he stood up and clapped his hands and said he'd better get back to work. He thanked me for taking care of him that day, which, in 11 years of working for him, he's never said thank you once. He held out his hand for a shake, so I took it. Then his face went blank and he furrowed his eyebrows. He pulled me close and whispered that I was not to let anyone in the house under any circumstance until his new work was finished. He squeezed too tightly and I could feel the bones in my hand rubbing against each other. There was a sense of desperation in his voice, and he spoke quietly as if there were other people in the room and he didn't want them to hear. He let go of me and walked up the stairs, stomping his feet without turning around, whispering to himself. It left me feeling greatly disturbed and feeling more guilty than ever for having to leave him alone this weekend. But I need to trust Joseph is as well as he says he is. I need a moment to relax.
March 1st. Entry by Joseph Kessler. Morning. Loose paper.
I am bursting with ideas. The spark that I was convinced I had lost finally returned, and I am entirely overjoyed. What a life, what a world. So many ideas, you couldn't fit all of them into a letterbox, even if you wrote them all down on small paper with a small hand or printed it out from a word processor in very small type. Everything is very bright in the room. Not sunlight, but in my head it feels so bright too, like there's a light in my forehead, some sort of headlamp that's projecting light onto everything I look at, like a single stream from my thoughts onto everything I see, forcing some psychic connection between the actual physical world and the world in my head. That's the me, the true me, seeing the world, the true world. And what a gift, what a gift, what a gift. I've gone through hell and back, and finally the lights are turned back on. I want to paint. I want to sketch. I want to go back to using charcoal, but first I need to finish this self-portrait, this fucking self-portrait that doesn't even look like me. It's my worst work yet. Just Christ, I'm ashamed of it. Just disgusting and black and gray and shapeless, and a portrait and name alone. It doesn't look a fucking thing like, no. That's all right, because there's a method, Joseph. One at a time. Work until it's done. So I'll do just that, even if I hate it. I truly hate it, my God. But remember the method, Joseph. The rules you live by that have gotten you so far, and you cannot stray from them. Not yet. You'll finish it, and then we'll move on to the next, and it'll be better and bigger and brighter than anything you've done yet. So many ideas. I'm so excited. I'm going outside to burn off some energy, and I'm too wound up to hold a brush, and it's cold and it's gray out, but I bet it will be sunny as soon as I climb to the top of Mount Royal. I mean, not climb. It's hardly even a hike. What do they call it? A mountain? It's not a mountain, more of a hill, but I love that small lake. Well, more of a pond at the top, and I know when I sit by it, the sun will come out again, and I'll feel refreshed and ready and finish this terrible work and move on, and my work will be good again. I know it will be.
March 1st. Entry by Joseph Kessler. Morning. Loose paper.
I'm never leaving my room again.
March 2nd. Typewritten essay by Joseph Kessler. Title: On the Shadow Men of Mount Royal. Abstract. This piece serves to expose the existence and conspiracy of the shadow men who hide in plain sight among the trees of Mount Royal and worse, among us. Goal: to be published in newspapers, magazines, and academic journals. By Joseph Kessler, artist and concerned citizen of Montreal.
To my fellow citizens, an urgent matter that has gone unaddressed must be brought to light. I will share my experience this morning that has me fearful for not just Mount Royal and the people who visit, but the city of Montreal at large. As I entered the trees and up the path to Mount Royal Park with the statue of Sir Georges-Étienne Cartier at my back, immediately I felt the sensation that I was not alone. And no, I do not mean there were other regular hikers on the path. I was in fact alone in all directions, or rather would be alone if it weren't for the men in the woods who followed me on all sides. I could only see them from the corners of my eyes, for when I turned to face them, they would disappear. However, on occasion, I could see them face to face if I moved suddenly and they could not disappear in time for me to not see them. Nearly invisible, these men are a terrifying sight to behold. They wear gray suits with gray hats, and their faces are gray without eyes, ears, noses, or mouths. They walk quietly and quickly, and I am afraid that they have not only the ability to hide in trees and look down, but they are so hazy that they themselves can walk through trees. Now, what is the purpose of their existence? I do not know, but I do worry that they are not confined to Mount Royal. Since coming into contact with them earlier today, I can feel their presence in my house. I believe that they are downstairs and outside of my door. Thankfully, they have not yet.
March 3rd. Max Leclerc's journal.
The doctors have just left with Joseph. I don't know if I've done the right thing, and I don't know what to do with myself, so I will write an entry and hopefully calm down. When I came in the house this morning, I found Joseph lying on his stomach on the couch with his head facing the TV, which was turned off. At first, I thought he was sleeping, but as I got closer, I saw his eyes were wide open. They didn't move, neither did he acknowledge me, and for a moment I thought maybe he was dead. I then noticed he was breathing. I sat down next to him and rubbed his shoulder, but he wouldn't look at me. I waved my hand in front of his eyes, and his eyes followed it. But once I stopped, he just continued staring forward. I asked him repeatedly if he was okay, but he wouldn't speak. Wondering if maybe he was blind drunk, I went upstairs into his studio for evidence, as there were not bottles around him. His studio was an absolute disaster. Paint was spilled all over the walls and the floor. Canvases were punched through, and he'd thrown a stool out the window, which was hanging halfway out the building, the legs on the inside of the house leaning on top of a heap of broken glass. His writer's desk, however, was completely pristine. I approached it and saw that he had written what appeared to be a letter on his word processor. Horrified that it might be a suicide note, I printed it off. It was some bizarre tract about men in the woods and being followed. My heart sank to the floor, and I thought I was going to throw up. And next to his word processor were loose stacks of paper that he'd scribbled on. Some were charcoal drawings of his face, and others were raving, psychotic journal entries. I gathered them together and put them in chronological order and read them, and I should have gotten help for him sooner. I should have listened to my gut. Most striking of all was a painting in front of the shattered window. Despite the madness of the studio, I saw what is easily his greatest work. The background is a dark black color with shades of bluish gray, but mostly completely black, textured layer upon layer of paint like a Clifford still painting. There are streaks of white that look like Franz Klein. He must have painted it upside down before turning it right side up, because drips of paint have dried upward on their way to the ceiling. And in the center of the painting is what at first looks like a spiraling scribble. But the more I stared, the more it took the shape of a human face. It's absolutely breathtaking. I could have stood for hours staring at it when I heard groaning downstairs and returned to him. Joseph was lying on his back, squeezing a blanket, weeping. I ran to him and knelt down, and he grabbed me close and cried into my shoulder. He was heaving up and down, unable to catch his breath, and I finally soothed him enough until he calmed down, gently pushed me away, curled up in a ball, and turned away from me. I put my hand on his head and asked if I could call for help, and he said nothing. I asked again, and he didn't respond. So I called an ambulance, and they've taken him away.
March 17th, Max Leclerc's journal.
I visited Joseph today at Hotel Dieu. I had to sit in the waiting room for nearly an hour before they called my name. A nice older woman greeted me and asked me if I had brought anything for Joseph. My face flushed as I realized I should have brought him flowers or paints or something. I asked if there was a gift shop, and she put her hand on my shoulder and told me that I couldn't leave anything behind in the room, so it was okay. She smiled and led me down the hall to his room. She said to find her when I was finished, and she would lead me back out. I went in his room, and he was facing away, looking out the window. His hair was cut short and cropped at the top. I expected to see him in a hospital gown, but he was wearing khakis and a flannel shirt. I called out hello, but he didn't turn around. He only moved his hand towards the window, so I approached. I wasn't sure if I should put my hand on his shoulder or hug him, so instead I faced him with my hands on my hips and said hello again. He was skinny. He was shaved. His eyes were focused this time, but he wouldn't look at me. He kept moving his head and gently waving at the window like someone was there. We were on the 3rd floor, so it was unlikely anyone was behind the glass, but I moved forward and looked out anyway. Nothing was there, not even a bird. I took a few steps back and pulled up a chair next to him, and we sat in silence. He kept gently waving at the glass, making faces and smiling. I asked who was there, but he still wouldn't speak to me. He kept at this for some time, so I stood behind him to see if he could see something I couldn't. Then I realized he was staring at his reflection, waving at it and making faces. He didn't recognize himself. He was like a baby looking into a mirror. Tears welled in my eyes, and I put my hands on his shoulders from behind. He didn't move. When I finally regained my composure, I left the room and called for the nurse to lead me back out. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time. I didn't cry. I stared at my hands until the sun went down behind Mount Royal. The glare disappeared off the hospital's windows, and I could see into the rooms from my driver's seat. I looked up to see if I could find Joseph, staring out into nothing, waving to his reflection, looking into his own eyes. I couldn't see him. I did catch my own eyes in the rearview mirror and stared at myself. My eyes were dark and sunken. I looked exhausted, but I recognized myself and thought about where I was and how I got there, and if my friend would ever be better. Then I started to cry.